everyone, it is Jazz here, and today I'm going to be doing another series of book reviews. Wanted to do a nice solid bulk review today that is a little bit more than my usual 5 books that I've been doing. So we're going to be talking about 7 books, and the theme is going to be classic and modern classic books. I am, of course, going to tell you all of the books that I will be reviewing in this video, and then I will leave the time codes below if you want to pick and choose what books you want to hear about, or, of course, you can watch the entire video. Today, I'm going to be reviewing The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, Twelfth Night by William Shakespeare, The Beautiful and the Damned by F. Scott Fitzgerald, Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I always feel like I'm pronouncing the poor woman character's name wrong. The Complete Tales of Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne. Can't pronounce names today. The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck, and the annotated edition of Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I'm going to start off with the book that I think is perhaps going to be the book that is going to be the most difficult for me to review, and go ahead and review The Turn of the Screw right up off the bat. So The Turn of the Screw is a sort of gothic, mysterious story that centers around a governess that is hired to have charges at this large manor. She has 2 children that she's caring for, and over the course of the story, she becomes convinced that these 2 malevolent ghosts are after the children. I did not enjoy this book whatsoever, and the only thing that probably kept me from DNFing this book was the fact that I did have it on audiobook, and I listened to the audiobook, and Emma Thompson, the actress, read the audiobook, and that kind of saved this book for me. I think the concept is really interesting, and I do think that if it had been executed in a different way and possibly had a different author, I may have enjoyed the story a great deal more, but unfortunately that is not the case. I hated the writing style. I rarely use the word hate in book reviews, but this is the time. Now, it's already a writing style that I was going to struggle with. I'm not really big on authors that use a lot of long sentences, and especially when they don't break up their sentence length, and that is something that they like to do. And Henry James is definitely an author that is a fan of the long sentence, and if you wonder why I don't like that, it's because by the time I get to the end of the sentence, I've already forgotten what the subject and point of it was. So it's just not my favorite thing in writing, period. Haha, no pun intended. But seriously, Henry James, find a period somewhere in there. Please do. On top of that, I do feel like this particular author was really just trying to get in as many words as he could possibly get in, regardless of whether it affected the clarity or the idea of the novel overall. I believe one of my Goodreads friends, Summer, who does have a booktube channel I can link you to, she described this book and her feelings really accurately by using the song Show Me from My Fair Lady, in which Eliza sings, "Words, words, words, I'm so sick of words." That's what this book made me feel. It was a very repetitive story. I do think maybe possibly part of that is because I think it was originally published as a serial, and there was kind of a need for it to be somewhat repetitive, but when you're reading it in one book, it is really irritating. And I thought, if I hear this governess say that the children are beautiful one more time, I'm gonna lose my mind. Plus, the way she said it made me honestly vaguely uncomfortable. I do think that the book is overly ambiguous, and that's a lot coming from me because I do like an ambiguous story. I like to kind of decide for myself what is going on, or if it has an ambiguous ending, I like to have that open-endedness, if it's written right, to kind of decide what happens afterwards and have like an imaginative moment. But I think there is a point where something can be so ambiguous in all its elements that it becomes confusing, or it becomes something where you don't know what is going on. And this definitely had that element. I think it would have been okay if the one factor that was ambiguous was whether the governess is losing her mind or not, and then kind of let some of the other stuff be more upfront and revealed. And I also feel like some of the mysteries weren't ever things that like came to fruition, but maybe it's just because I was so impeded by the clarity of the novel itself that I just missed it. I don't know. Yeah. I gave this book 2 stars. I was very, very tempted to give this 1 star, but I do think it does have a few redeeming factors that made me give it that extra star. One is that I do think the concept, like I said, is pretty good as a concept, and I think that's why so many people keep trying to adapt this over and over again. In general, it is a readable 2-star book. Like, it's a readable book. I've read 1 and 2-star books that were painful to read, and this is readable, and also, like I said, the audiobook saved it for me. If you are going to check out this book, or you really think you need to check out this book, or you actually have to for school or something, I would definitely recommend reading it along with the audiobook like I did. You can't just listen because of how the writing style is. So that is my recommendation if you are going to read Turn of the Screw. But honestly, I don't really recommend that you read Turn of the Screw at all if you don't have to. Let us move on to the play Twelfth Night. We are following a young woman named Viola who has lost her twin brother in a shipwreck, and she disguises herself as a man and goes to work for the Duke of the city, and insanity sort of ensues because the Duke is in love with this woman named Olivia, and he asks Viola to woo her for him, and basically everybody ends up thinking they're in love with the wrong person, and it's mayhem. I'm just gonna be honest. In my opinion, it is not Shakespeare's best play. I'm sure that it works for somebody, that somebody loves it. Maybe it's better in actual performance. I kind of doubt it will totally work for me, but I'm open to watching some sort of production of this because Shakespeare in general is just better off performed, and I think that's to be said about any play. Now, I think this does have some really interesting concepts that it explores in terms of romance and elements of how different people work together and how people view other people and make assumptions about people, and I really think those are interesting concepts. But yet again, like execution-wise, I don't know that it really hit with me. Now, I do really appreciate this edition, by the way, because I love reading the Cliff's Notes complete editions of Shakespeare plays. They do the annotations on the side of it, but also every scene has sort of a summary at the front of it, and then it has a commentary at the end of it to basically discuss everything that happened in the scene and some of the concepts and ideas that are explored in it. And honestly, those were my favorite parts of the play. I really did like the commentary. That was like my favorite part. Main reason why I just think this play is okay in comparison with some of the others that I've read is that most of it is constructed of subplots. There's no real through line main plot and then like a subsequent subplot. The whole entire thing is different subplots. So it's like reading a short story book with sort of some of the same characters, and I'm not really into that. So structurally, it didn't really suit me. But also, I think that the humor in it is very hard to understand for a modern audience. I feel like some of Shakespeare's other comedies, because not all of his comedies are actually comedic, but his comedies are ones where the humor can kind of translate. It's a little bit more timeless. This one, if I had not had the annotations, I probably wouldn't have thought some of the jokes and the things in it were very funny. And also some of the humor in it is kind of cruel and nasty. And I didn't really appreciate the ones that I did get because of that. Now, I do appreciate learning about these things, but I didn't enjoy it. The dialogue is kind of snappy. I did appreciate that. I do think it's definitely a readable classic play, and I am willing, like I said, to watch some sort of stage production of it to see if it comes off a little better to me. So I did give this 3 stars. On to a modern classic, which is The Beautiful and the Damned. This is the story of a man named Anthony and his soon-to-be wife, and wife later on in the book, Gloria. This follows, for the most part, these 2 characters as they navigate their somewhat dysfunctional relationship and their life as they try to figure out how to be functional human beings in society when they've kind of grown up thinking that they are going to be people of affluence. This book was a weirder experience than I expected getting into this. I think I had a expectation of what this book was going to be because I've read The Great Gatsby, and it's not really like The Great Gatsby except in the general style of the book. Obviously, Fitzgerald has a really cool style to me that is very rhythmic, and I really like how it's written in the jazz age, so it kind of has a jazzy rhythm to it, and I do really like the metaphors and similes that are used in this, which I think made the experience of the book cool in that aspect when sometimes it got weird. For example, there are moments where this book just randomly jumps from being normal prose into play format for no apparent reason. Well, I do think the writing style is very fun and interesting. I also think that this book could have been streamlined and edited down quite a bit, particularly when it comes to a lot of Anthony's college friends just sitting around and discussing stuff. I think this book would have been better off just really sticking to the concept of following Anthony and Gloria and their story together, because those are the really interesting parts. Definitely think that this book, because of that though, did wander into what I call the wondrous tedious sort of story, where it has some good qualities, but it definitely started to get a little bit repetitive and tedious. But yeah, this book could have been way more repetitive because it's literally about 2 people who just cannot get their lives together, making the same mistakes over and over again. And it could have gotten real cray. So I guess we should be happy that it didn't. I will also warn you that there are some thoughts on different races and religions that are of the time when this was written. That's what classic book reading is sometimes like. You just like, ooh. Little tedious, but has some good stuff in it. I gave this 3.5 stars. Next up, it is time to review Karenina. Oh my gosh, I cannot say it. This classic novel actually is a bit hard to summarize because it is named after one person in the book, but there are many storylines and many characters covered in the story. So let's just focus on Anna's story as the summary, which follows Anna as she is torn between her life as a sophisticated woman and wife and her passionate affair with Count Vronsky. But like I said, there are many other main characters in this story. First thing that really did surprise me was how easy it was to get into the writing style of the book and invested in the plot and the characters. It's a very beautifully written story. It has a lot of beautiful quotes and a lot of beautiful ideas and beautiful descriptions in it. I really liked how human the characters felt. They did feel like real people, which was very fun to read in general. There were just so many emotional and psychological layers to these characters that they did feel like genuinely real people, and that was chef kiss. So this is another book out of these classic books that does contain a lot of dialogues and discussions that could be perceived as pretentious, but the thing is that Tolstoy has a gift for making discussions about things that are normally not very interesting seem surprisingly interesting. There are, of course, long dialogues about social and political and religious topics that are delved into, and they never get overly repetitive or they never feel necessarily pretentious. I think because you are somewhat invested in the characters, or they are coming from a very character-based experience, and I think that helps in a long way. Like, certain things about just talking about farming really shouldn't be that interesting, but you're vaguely intrigued. Now, I do think those discussions do run a little long for my personal taste, but I still think I was more interested in those long discussions than I would have been in any other book because of the way it was written. So plus on that. There is a certain level of saga to this book too. I don't know what I mean by a saga, but you know, it's got a family drama aspect to it. And that really appeals to me greatly. There are some romances in it, obviously, but I feel like even in that terms, it's more of a family sort of saga. I did read this book along while listening to the audiobook read by the actress Maggie Gyllenhaal, and I think she did an awesome job reading this novel, especially because it is a super long novel, and I feel sorry. I hope she drank some tea and got like all those vocal cords rested every time she read this book. I would highly recommend this book and highly recommend the audiobook. I gave Anna Karenina 4 stars. Onto The Good Earth, which ironically matches my eye and outfit sort of look. The Good Earth is, I think, considered a modern classic. It follows a farmer in China and his family and his trials and triumphs. I did also really enjoy this book. I feel like it was a novel that I found a little bit more intellectually stimulating than sort of emotionally stimulating, but that is kind of my general idea and generally how I feel about books that are in that sort of literary fiction zone. I think the books in that genre are intended to make you think. I feel like they're more centered around theme as opposed to anything else. I really appreciated the themes explored in this book, which were very much about, to me, how your choices affect your family, not just in the immediate, but in the long term, and how your children will eventually treat you based on the way you raised your children. Greed and wealth and having money and not having money and what that does to you psychologically and things like that. I found those really particularly interesting themes to be discussed and thought about. It really got that family drama-ness going in my soul. That was another thing that I really appreciated about this, is seeing how the family interacted and how the aunts and uncles interacted with the main character, and sometimes you just was like, I got to sigh, because dude, that was not a good choice. What you doing, hun? You could yell at it a little bit, even though it wasn't super character driven, which I found very interesting. I do also really enjoy Pearl S. Buck's writing style. It's very different, I would say. I can't really explain the differences, but I will say that she uses simile and metaphor in a different way than a lot of different authors that I've read, and I really thought that was fun and kind of tasty. I ended up giving this a 4.75 stars, I think. Maybe I might even say that it was more of a 4.5 star like after the fact now, but I still think it's a really excellently written book with a lot of great concepts. The only reason I kind of leave away and don't give it a full 5 star is that it's not an own voices book. I don't know that much about Chinese culture and the time period in which this is set to judge how accurate the depiction of those characters is, if you know what I'm saying. So even though Pearl S. Buck, I believe, grew up in China and knows a great deal about people, she's not Chinese. So I think you probably should read some reviews to really gauge how that affects people that are actually of that cultural experience. I just judge this as a novel, and just for its enjoyment level and just for the thoughts I got out of it. So that's why I still give it a really high rating. On to some classic children's literature with Winnie the Pooh. So this book collects both Winnie the Pooh and The House at Pooh's Corner. Yes, and if you don't know Winnie the Pooh, it is, of course, about Christopher Robin and his bear, Winnie the Pooh, who lives in a fictional little wood called the 100-Acre Wood. If you like children's literature and you like stories that are very anecdotal, this is very much the type of book that you will enjoy. I, of course, like those things quite a bit. Now, I don't really have a lot to say about Winnie the Pooh solely because it's just a charming read. That's the best I can explain it. There's all these little anecdotes that are very funny about the little antics of the little characters, and they're very adorable and cute. And there's occasionally a little allegory in there thrown in for a bit of children can learn a lesson moment. But there's not a lot of that. It's mostly just kind of comedic stories about Pooh being silly and the other characters reacting to that and things like that. Also, I will say that it does give your heart a little giggle of fun. I got my edition at Barnes & Noble, so it has actually like very pretty color illustrations, which I believe were done by Ernest H. Shepard. I don't know if all of the editions have the color ones. I believe the old copy that I have of just the first book, Winnie the Pooh, just has drawings that are in black and white, but still beautiful drawings to look at, so it's visually pleasing as well as very fun to read. Definitely check out this book. It is bomb. I gave it 5 stars. Finally, we get to the last one, which is the Annotated Little Women. Little Women is a book that follows 4 sisters as they initially go through the fact that their father is serving in the Union Army in the Civil War, and also follows them on through their life into adulthood. You'll know that I'm obsessed with this book and have watched pretty much every adaptation of Little Women and have actually reviewed Little Women on this channel before when I think the first time I read it. Don't watch it because old videos are cringy and not on good cameras. So we'll try not to wax poetically too long on this book, but I still wanted to discuss it because I wanted to discuss the annotated edition because sometimes it's just fun to discuss particular editions. But I do have some new thoughts on Little Women, so obviously that's why we're here. I do think when I initially read this book, a lot of my thoughts on it were informed by different film adaptations of it that I'd seen previous to reading the book, and also just my general crazy place in life. I really focused more on the comfort of the book and the characters and my identification with a lot of the characters in the book, but I think I was able to enjoy those things upon a reread as well, but also kind of delve more into general concepts and overall themes of the book. It's about people really striving for self-betterment and self-improvement and finding their place in society that suits them and how to be the best person in that place. I was struck by how universal that was. But another theme that I realized in the book that I really appreciated was that it's very much a situation that the book starts with these girls having all these dreams and ideas of what their life is going to be, and obviously that is not how things go. As you grow into an adult, you realize that things are not going to go to your plan. But I feel like the idea of the book is that even though things didn't go exactly the way they thought it would go, things were still okay. Things were still good. Things were still fulfilling and wonderful. And so I think it's a really nice, comforting concept that things will be all right even if things don't go to your ideology or plan. Now, also, I love this book because it's a family book, and as we've seen with previous books mentioned in this, I like a good family structured book. But also, I do think that the characters are so well developed and so well thought out. Now, granted, if you read the annotated edition and if you know anything even previous to reading this book, it is very much sort of grounded in Louisa May Alcott's experience with her own sisters and her thoughts on their sort of personalities. Although these are still fictional characters that she fictionalized, she still drew from some life experience in that, and I think that's why there's a nice reality grounded into these characters. Let's just jump into now talking about the actual annotated edition of this. Now, the good thing about this annotated edition is that the introduction is actually really informational and actually interesting, which cannot be said for every annotated edition of a classic novel. Just saying, some of them is snooze fest. It also has a lot of photographs from Louisa May Alcott's life and experience and things like that. So those are nice visually pleasing things. Also, I think in general, this has a really high quality moment of having some good photographs. Her youngest sister, who Amy is based on, was an artist as well, and so there are some illustrations from that. There are lots of pictures from locations that are mentioned in this book. I really do enjoy learning about the literature that is referenced in classic books. I think it's very sort of gives a new level to what the author is trying to accomplish. And I think particularly in this book, not just because Jo is a writer and a voracious reader, but also because there are a lot of themes from other novels that are kind of thrown into this. I think that really gives you a higher level of information and another kind of layer to the story that I really appreciated. It actually kind of made me want to check out some of these books that are mentioned in here. I feel like I fully understood the characters this time around, and I definitely think I'm probably going to reread this book again this year because 2021 needs that comfort read. So I obviously would highly recommend, and I think I will just continue talking about it for the rest of time. So get used to hearing about this book. I gave this one 5 stars. So those were 7 book reviews of classic and modern classic books. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing my thoughts on all of these novels, and I hope you will drop me a comment below with your thoughts and all those things about all these books. I think classic books are the funnest ones to discuss. That is it for today, my fabulous peeps. I will see you all soon.